here's a Scared for Real's Legacy Special.
Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
Adam Perry.
92 years ago this month, one of the most interesting, they called it horror drama, Freaks. I saw some titles floating around online. It was also known as Forbidden Love, Nature's Mistakes, or The Monster Story. But it's actually based on a short story by Todd Robbins called Spurs. And I say loosely based on it because the only thing that remains from that short story is the woman putting on a charade, pretending to fall in love with a rich guy, and then she had a real love. That's the only part of Spurs that actually exists in the movie Freaks. But what an amazing film, but what a troubled film, because when it first got made, it was like a 91-minute movie, and then 20 some odd minutes were cut, so it's whittled down to 64 minutes, and some parts actually cut the prologue thing out, so it's 62 minutes, and they can't find that 28, 25 extra minutes of the movie. It's one of those, it's gone, unless they miraculously go down to Brazil like all these other movies. Well, here you go. Here's the 91-minute cut.
mean,
but you've actually read because Todd Browning directed it.
Yep.
And the ending that's in Freaks is not.
It's not his.
Nothing to do with Todd Browning whatsoever. I mean, that was just kind of, we got to have a happy ending. Well, the movie did not have a happy ending originally. So you've actually delved into Todd Browning's biography. So
yes,
in his biography, what does it say about Freaks?
Well, first of all, also remember this is one of the most controversial movies of all time too.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it now, but back then
Well, I mean, even still today, because Todd Browning comes from a carny life, and he liked to use that theming through all of his movies.
Yes.
This carnival, sideshow freaks, vaudeville type stuff, and in the case of Freaks, he really did use people with these, abnormalities, to put it politely, and kind of exploit them. And it's still today is pretty daring and pretty controversial.
But he exploited them, but it was also drawing attention to something that we as a culture kind of like shy away from.
Yeah, but it's still perceived as exploiting these people for financial gain, and to a point he did kind of do that. So yes, the for those of you who haven't read it or didn't know about it, I highly recommend. It's called Dark Carnival, the Todd Browning story by our one of my favorite authors who just recently passed away, the late David J. Scull.
Yes,
he dives deep into the life and career of Todd Browning. I mean, obviously, we get a lot of Freaks, we get a lot of Dracula, we get a lot of his relationship with Lon Chaney Sr.
Because Lon Chaney was supposed to be in this movie,
yes,
too.
Well, and that's the thing. The thing about Freaks is Freaks was supposed to happen during the silent era.
Right.
And it just kept getting pushed back. And I think
because of all of the subject matter.
Yes.
It's not an easy thing to address.
Just answer your question quickly as far as the ending of Freaks and why it was changed. Todd Browning with MGM was basically on his last legs between his behavior with his alcoholism and putting out some products, some movies that weren't financially successful like he was during his Chaney years. By this time, they had really, really had enough of Todd Browning. He had the big hit with Dracula, which brought him back to MGM, and it was just one flop after another. Then he pushes this Freaks on him.
Because Dracula was the last real success he had financially.
One of the last big ones. And Freaks was not a success. It was a flop. It was made for $300,000, made only $341,000 in return.
Yeah,
this was not. It's a class. It's a cult classic now. It's an important film now.
Very important. It's essential. Yes.
But it certainly wasn't that.
No.
case in 1932.
Because the only time someone could actually see the entire cut was January 28th when it first premiered. It was 91 minutes. Yeah. And that was it. They even said this is the only time you're going to be able to see this movie in its entirety.
Yeah, I mean, and so much it was edited out, it was censored, and again, as far as unless somewhere in South America there's a hidden full print of the original.
Yeah, it seems like they go down to South America for some reason.
Like we've said many times, especially talking about these older movies, film does not last forever.
No,
it deteriorates. It destroys over time. And again, I joke about, but it's very serious. Especially on lots like Universal, there's always a convenient fire every 20 years,
right.
That damages this stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I know this is MGM, but they've had their share of, lost films and fires and tragic, all sorts of chaos on their lots. So, and again, for a long time, Todd Browning was forgotten about, especially after he got let go from MGM after this Freaks debacle.
Right. And it was a pretty big debacle.
He's not thought of as, we think of him today as one of the all-time greats and most important.
Inventive, I would say very inventive.
Because, again, his silent movies with Lon Chaney, Dracula, Murders in the Rue Morgue, and Freaks. We look at it today as like, wow, this is brilliant stuff. This is important stuff. This is controversial stuff.
Yeah.
It was not taken that way when it came out.
No, it was not. And it was a huge backlash on it. Now, in its original 90-minute running time, it had some success, but overall it was just a huge failure. And it was just, and like you say, the exploitive side of it, I could see that, but at the same time, this was one of the few opportunities we get to see and learn about some people, that are born with these rare informalities.
Right.
It's slightly disabled. I don't like that kind of label myself, but it's like, I don't see the movie. Yes, he made money off of it, but it wasn't just because of them.
Right.
He wanted, I think, some side of him, we'll never know because the guy is no longer with us, but in the biography, did he say anything about what was his argument against the whole exploitive criticism? Because I didn't see the movie as exploitive.
Right.
I understand why people said that. I understand that, but I disagree with it. To me, it wasn't exploiting them. It was drawing attention to things that we as a society shy away from. When we see somebody that looks completely different, we're taken aback.
I think, again, with him growing up in the carnival sideshow,
right.
Again, this is where, before he was a filmmaker of any sort, he was a vaudevillian performer.
Right.
And
a lot of them were.
So I think, so after reading David J. Scull's biography on him, I think going to topics like this, and again, the Unholy Three.
That was another one.
And just about,
West of Zanzibar. Had another one.
The Unknown.
Yeah,
all those Chaney movies that feature deformities. It's just kind of his comfort.
Right.
And I think the reason why he used people with real deformities and freaks was just for the authenticity of it.
Authenticity.
I don't think he was really trying to exploit them personally. All the actors who worked with him on Freaks never said anything bad about Todd Browning. They were treated horribly by the cast and crew.
Well, yeah, they mentioned in MGM, a lot of employees were discomforted by their presence.
Yes. But as far as having direct contact with Todd Browning, none of the actors from Freaks that I know of have ever said that he mistreated them or in any way, but they were treated very poorly on the MGM backlot.
I see this, like the Siamese twins, the Earls, the performers were not allowed to be on the studio lot. They were regulated to a specially built tent.
Yes.
Imagine that. You couldn't go anywhere except for this tent.
Right.
And the movie kind of shows it at the beginning. It was,
Sure.
Again, I will never know what Todd Browning was thinking. I mean, the closest we get is that biography.
Yeah, and even still, the struggle with David J. Scull writing the biography is because he was so private. He didn't do interviews, so he had kind of had to fill in the blanks for people who knew him and worked with him closely, and
Actually had conversations.
and what very little dialogue he did have with the press.
Right.
So it's fascinating because he, again, when the guy drank, he was a totally different person. Just like he had a serious alcohol problem.
That happened with Errol Flynn a lot too.
Errol Flynn, Lon Chaney Jr.
Yes, big time.
Colin Clive, which led to his very early death at 37.
Montgomery Clift had a problem.
So I mean,
anyway,
I don't think the stigma that came with this movie necessarily comes from Todd Browning's actual involvement. I think the stigma just comes from what he was doing and the way the studio perceived it, and then just how culture perceived it. I mean, it was a brutal. It was described as brutal and grotesque. I mean, let's face it. We're talking about a movie where you have basically a normal woman marries a tiny person, a dwarf, a tiny person,
and she even makes fun of dwarf. She calls him like that several times in the movie.
Basically, the climax of the movie is them literally turning her into a deformity, like them.
So it begs the question: who's the real freak?
Yeah.
And the whole there's the whole class structure, which critics have pointed out. The class, the low, the higher class. I don't think that's the case here. Again, I interpret it a very sympathetic, a very sympathetic look at these people. Again, they're born with quote unquote abnormalities,
right?
Or disabilities. I hate that term disabilities because I've worked with people who had cerebral palsy, and I can tell you they can do more than a lot of us can.
Sure.
you know. So the fact that he showed that in this movie is, to me, like, I know he wanted authenticity, but at the same time, I really think he was trying to paint a picture that these are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're not freaks. And the people who are the ones that are like making fun of them, try to kill them. Yeah. I mean, let's say you were telling it. It's a pretty macabre story.
Yeah.
Poisoning the dwarf so they can get the inheritance that was his.
Yep.
I mean, manipulation of them and it just this discrimination against them too, because they point that out several times, like right in the beginning of the movie. What are these freaks doing? They're monsters, that's what they're referred to.
Right.
And I think he was trying to say these are not monsters. These are human beings, and they have feelings just like we do. And I think the movie showcases it brilliantly. And I feel if we had the 91-minute version with us, it would expand on that even more.
Right. But, again, I'm totally not disagreeing with you, but I'm just kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate here just for conversation's sake. We also got to remember that you and I have watched this movie through the lenses of people who've, living in the late 20th century, now early 21st century.
Right.
You're talking about a movie that was seen originally in the early 20th century,
right?
With talking movies just starting.
It was shocking to them.
It was shocking to them. And listen, fortunately, we live in an era where things are a lot more tolerated, and a lot people, people's way of life, people's physical and mental disability. Again, I hate to say disabilities, but I don't really know any other
abnormalities, against the norm.
But what is normal now?
Right.
But it's point I'm trying to mean is we're a much more tolerable society now, compared to what we had in 1932 or 1929 when he originally tried to get this movie doing, and the way people thought was just different, and so again, you see a movie. You see him, and no greater tribute to Todd Browning. I know you're not a big fan of this series, but American Horror Story, the season where they did the Freak Show,
I never even seen it. So
you never watched? I highly recommend watching some of.
I guess you were talking to somebody else who was.
I must have. Yeah,
I've never seen it.
All right, well then I'll. American Horror Story Freak Show is a perfect tribute to Todd Browning, and because it showcases people with abnormalities,
right?
In a positive light, and basically it's a continuation of Todd Browning's work,
right?
In a horror setting, and but still,
but talk about being ahead of his time, like you said,
way ahead of his time.
No one, there was a lot of people, and even then, when I first saw it, I was like, wow, I never knew it was possible a guy could just have a torso.
Yeah,
I mean, I never thought that was possible,
right?
And I learned a lot by watching this movie, and again, it way ahead of its time. I can just imagine people seeing that on the big screen.
The finale, where they attacked I can't remember her name.
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra, exactly. I'm sorry.
Hercules and Cleopatra.
When they're attacking Cleopatra, I mean,
what she deserved. By the way.
She deserved, but terrifying images. To this day, the thunder and lightning, and seeing the dwarves crawling in the mud,
the torso with a knife in his mouth. Yeah,
I mean, this was terrifying. So I mean, still freaks you out today. No pun intended, but that was intense for a 1932 audience,
right?
And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the failure of it. Again, was how everybody was feeling about Todd Browning at the time. Again, you had a guy with a massive ego from his Lon Chaney years, the success of his Lon Chaney movies. Couple that with his Universal monster of Dracula.
Yeah. It was a monster, literally huge
and figuratively. I mean, we're gonna, on the anniversary of Dracula, we're gonna talk about that this month. For MGM to thinking they're gonna get another Dracula, and they get Freaks.
Yeah,
so that had to be not a pleasant time for MGM Studios.
No. Just talk about the impact of this movie. I mean, again, the plot is very basic. It's one we've seen 1,000 times, but it still shocks people to this very day.
Yeah.
No computers to take off the arms, the legs, or to make people look a certain way, the quote unquote pinhead,
Yeah.
Unfortunate that more people haven't seen this movie. I'm glad more and more people are discovering it.
Right.
Criterion just re-released this film lavishly. It looks beautiful. Hopefully I can upgrade my Freaks DVD one of these days. And again, we go to the question, is it a horror movie? Is Freaks a horror movie? Because some critics say it does not embody the genre. I mean, this could have easily been brought up. We can bring Aaron again and dissect Freaks. Is it a horror movie? I think it fits because of the shocking nature of the film, and I can understand how some people wouldn't feel that way because there is some melodrama aspects of the film.
Sure.
And they had to be. I love the fact that the two dwarves, who are real life brother and sister, they're made to be husband and wife at the end. I mean, they were engaged in the movie. It's like they had to be really careful because they're brother and sister. I think they would both go on to be in The Wizard of Oz several years later.
Yeah,
a real life brother and sister playing the love interest. It could have had a whole incest nature to add to the whole controversy of the film.
Thankfully, they didn't go.
No,
down that
thank
route.
God.
This movie was doomed from the start.
Right
again. With MGM and like we said, the forcing everybody to segregate on the MGM backlot. This movie comes out and like people were running out of the theater, throwing up. I mean, like this just did not go well.
Well,
there's a rumor that even a miscarriage happened during one of the screenings.
Well, the interesting thing about it is I found there is some descriptions of what some of those deleted sequences were.
Yeah.
I mean, you get to see more footage of them attacking Cleopatra. She's lying under a lightning-struck tree.
Yeah.
And then Hercules being castrated. Imagine sitting there and watching the main bad guy getting castrated.
Right.
I mean, we were just talking about Street Fighter, the guy ripping his extremities off. Seeing something like that in a movie theater in 1932, let alone 1974, that's just like, wow.
Yeah, and Todd Browning, also he was a perfectionist as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the type of guy who would spend 20 hours filming one scene until he got it right.
Right.
So could you imagine doing a castration scene for 20 hours if Todd Browning wasn't happy with himself?
Yeah. He was almost like the Kubrick of his era of, trying to get perfection.
Yeah, so no wonder why MGM had a problem with him.
Well, and I guess they showed sequences of him singing falsetto because he'd been castrated.
Yeah.
And there was more footage of her quacking.
Yep.
Which was shocking enough in the few seconds it did show. It's too bad it's lost. In some eras, we get to see different cuts of the film. A lot of these Hong Kong films, you get to see 40 minutes that were cut.
Yeah.
And put back into the movie. It's too bad that we can't see that because I'd love to watch one and then watch the other.
Right.
Just to compare which one flows better.
Yeah.
Because it's we'll never know because it doesn't feel truncated, but it is if we're missing 20 some odd minutes worth of footage.
Sure.
I haven't seen any cut versions. I will go back to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. For years I saw the 2-hour 41-minute version, and then I saw the almost 3-hour version, and there's some of those sequences that definitely add a lot of oomph to the storyline.
Right.
It's just a shame, it's now we can look back on it so easily now, and because we have all of this film preservation at our fingertips, thanks to Scorsese, Spielberg, Coppola, and all of them. Back then they didn't care about it. It was just, okay, well, this movie's a flop, let's burn it, or let's use it for World War making shoes.
Yeah.
That's basically what the old film was used for, and it's unfortunate.
How society's changed on this movie. I mean, one of the backers of this movie is, believe it or not, it was TMC when they started showing it on cable. It really went from a forbidden film that no one, should watch to,
right,
being championed as a movie everybody should watch.
Right. It's to me, it's essential cinema. If people ask, what are your top recommendations for films, I have a list of 250, and Freaks would be on that list.
Yeah.
How can it not?
Not that Rotten Tomatoes, holds any water really, but to have a 94% rating, for a movie over 90 years old, that's pretty impressive. I do want to get a hold of a DVD copy. I watch it on streaming nowadays, but on the Criterion Collection, again, my author here, God, rest his soul, David A. Skull.
He actually recorded it. Yeah,
he does a commentary for it.
Yeah,
and
well, I'll let you know the half off sale's coming up probably within the month. We can get it half off the price.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah,
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll say, hey, Nicole, I got to buy Adam a present, and then keep it for myself because it also includes 2 other Todd Browning movies.
Yeah,
the Unknown, which Lon Chaney pretending to be a guy with no arms,
and then he turns into a guy with no arms. Yeah,
literally.
One of Joan Crawford's very first movie. She was only 18 years old.
I know. That's I have that on DVD, but there's also The Mystic.
The Mystic.
Yeah, that has never had any home video release. That's also part of the 3-film set, the Criterion. Brilliantly, a 2K restoration, and it looks. I've seen previews of it. It's just like it looks like a brand new movie.
Yeah,
92-year-old movie, looking like it just made yesterday.
That's awesome.
This movie has quite the legacy. I mean, there was even a comic book series back in the 90s, and there was 2 unofficial remakes. And I know Alex Winters kind of did like a wink nod tribute with Freaked back in the early 90s. Yep. But is there anything else that you were able to find in this biography about this movie? Any other information? Because I just want to know as much as I can about Freaks. And again, since there's no audio or any documentation from Browning himself, it's like almost a mystery on how he personally felt. Because to me, he wanted to show these people are people, and it's okay if you see people with no arms who have a different type of face, a different shaped head. They're okay. They're real people. Don't be afraid. Yeah, that's what I got out of the movie.
Basically, Freaks kind of blackballed him, for the rest of his career. I mean, he did. He would have some success with Mark of the Vampire a couple
Mark
years
of the
later,
Vampire. Yeah,
which is essentially a remake of London After Midnight they did with Chaney, now with Bela Lugosi in the vampire make-believe vampire role. Again, between his personal issues with his drinking, his behavior on set with the studio, he never really treated actors poorly, but he definitely clashed with his writers and his producers, and again, mixed with his dual drinking personality.
Right.
And then the subject matter of Freaks really blackballed him, and he didn't really recover after that. Like you said, we got Mark of the Vampire, and
I think
he
one
got
other movie. There was like one other movie he did.
There were a couple here and there, but nothing with the backing like he used to have. He just kind of fades into obscurity. He gets a couple writing credits here and there, and he lives out the rest of his life basically unknown.
No pun intended, the unknown. But it's just a shame that he wrote nothing. There's no information of how he personally felt about Freaks, because again, I see it the way it's presented. Everyone sees art differently.
Yeah.
I see it as hey, these people are human. Don't mess with them, because like real human beings in real life, other human beings, something will happen to you. So that's what I got out of the movie. I don't see it as exploitive as other people do. Again, I understand why, but I don't feel it was meant to exploit them personally.
Right.
It was meant to just, again, take a part of society that we're not familiar with and make it seem like it's okay.
Yeah, and like I said, we see that now, but again, 1931 audiences, 1932 audiences, they see it as exploiting these people and upsetting the housewife. Again, that's not my opinion.
Well,
that's the 1932 opinion. You're scaring the poor housewife who went out, on a date with her husband because she never gets out of the house, and you're watching her she's watching a movie that's making her vomit.
Right. I wish I was on the set so I could say, I accept you. You're one of me.
Yeah, right. Todd Browning, again, was a very private guy. He never did interviews. It was very seldom that he did interviews. Even if he was criticized, he never really responded to it. If he did, it was in private. So there's really not much.
Kubrick was the same way there are some audio recordings here and there, but for the most part, he didn't really want to talk about his process. He didn't really want to talk about, okay, this is what it is. He did explain a few things in some audio interviews that do exist, but it's there. You interpret it however you want.
Yeah, and again, if you have, you can find it on Audible. That's where I've listened to it. Or again, with David J. Skull just recently passing away, I don't know what the future holds for his publications. I'm sure they will still be in print. Hopefully through his family will keep his works in constant print, but only time will tell for that. But it is on Audible. If you getting a physical copy is not really available for you, it is narrated by David J. Skull, and David J. Skull, he was one of the best, and why he was one of the best is because he would take movies like Freaks, Dracula, Frankenstein, all those classic monster movies, and for decades where they were just seen as silly monster movies,
B movies,
and he made them feel like they were important, like they are,
right?
And that was the brilliance of David J. Skull,
right?
You love these movies, and he made you feel like it's okay to love these movies and to share the story of how these movies were made. So Dark Carnival by David J. Skull, I can't recommend it enough. It's on the whole life and career of what he could dig up on Todd Browning.
And that's the closest you can get into getting inside Todd Browning's
exactly. because, again, Todd Browning did not like media.
No.
He did not like talking to reporters or anything and sharing his life and his thoughts. So it's a fan. And then again, there's Freaks itself. If you are a serious film watcher, you take watching movies very seriously. Freaks is one of the most important movies you could watch. Mm-hmm. Just like all of Todd Browning's hits,
right?
From Dracula to The Unholy Three, The Mystic, The Unknown. hopefully in the next couple of years we'll finally get that print that's supposed to be alive of London After Midnight.
Yeah, I've been hearing people tease about it. We've talked about it a little bit. I've seen little articles here and there talking about it.
Yeah, and David in the epilogue of Dark Carnival, David J. Skull talks about it that he did confirm that there is one surviving print by a private owner. He didn't say where it is or who it's owned, but basically this guy who owns this only copy of London After Midnight is waiting for it to go public domain before he allows people to view it. Mm-hmm. So
comment on our YouTube channel. Send us messages to our social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook,
could be,
Twitter. Just reach out. Let us know what you think. Give us some feedback or requests too.
Again, you've basically seen London After Midnight if you've watched Mark of the Vampire. Because he remade his own stuff.
Yeah.
But again, to see Lon Chaney in the incredible makeup that he made,
his own makeup,
in life and not in still photos, would be really, really cool.
Yeah. But Todd Browning, way ahead of his time with Freaks, and again, Criterion just last year re-released not one but 3 2K restored prints of not only Freaks but also The Unknown and The Mystic. Either way, it's always better to watch a movie on Blu-ray than it is to stream it because the quality is better, the sound is better, everything is better when you watch it on a Blu-ray. But if you're picky with your movies, you only want to get certain ones. I've got to try to get this if I can too. Again, it's a 3-movie set. Todd Browning. I forget the name of the title, but you just look up Todd Browning Criterion release, and you'll see that you can actually get Freaks in a brilliant 2K restoration. It looks like it was just made yesterday.
Yeah, and again, watch his stuff. Watch Freaks, watch Dracula, watch Murders in the Rue Morgue, which was his follow-up to Dracula with Bela Lugosi. It's run of Universal horror movies in the 30s and 40s. Murders in the Rue Morgue often gets overlooked, and it's just as good as any of them. It's a fantastic movie, and
it came out the same year as Freaks.
Same year as Freaks. Yep. But again, I mean, Freaks kind of was shot and canned.
I know,
and held for a little bit. But again, at the same time. And we're going to be talking more about Todd Browning later this month. As a birthday present, we're going to Valentine's Day. We're going to talk about Dracula. Yeah. My birthday.
Yes.
So you're going to get more Todd Browning and Bela Lugosi to come, but
plus Christopher Lee and Hammer and all sorts of Dracula stuff.
But again, Valentine's Day 1931. American horror world changed with Dracula. The guy who's responsible for that is Todd Browning, the same guy who's responsible for Freaks. Watch Freaks, watch his other stuff, and check out the book by the legendary, the late David J. Skull, Dark Carnival, the Todd Browning story.
Gotcha. So let us know what you think about Freaks. If you want to weigh in on Freaks or any of our episodes, just comment on our YouTube channel. You can reach out to us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if there's any requests, if you really want us to dive into your particular favorite movie, well, let us know what movie it is. Even if it's a movie I can't stand, I will tolerate it for you. So, Scared for Reals, thank you.